everyone. I'm Sehul Shah. I'm the founder and CEO of DeciZone. So today I'm going to have a quick chat about how we can leverage the AWS Cloudfront and S3 services to deliver static assets for single page applications. So as most of you probably know, the software as a service is a big phenomenon lately, and a lot of these applications are single page applications. And without going into too much detail about the architecture, what happens is most of the single page application requests are addressed using REST API calls. And then if you have designed it properly, you would be handling a lot of the static content using S3 buckets or any kind of data storage source. So this is actually a very good approach for helping with your performance as well as saving for your storage. So I wanted to actually take an example of a live application, and I want to show you the DeciZone application that we have designed with the same kind of architecture. So for those who don't know, DeciZone is a web application where you can create interactive decision trees, which basically allow you to create flowcharts for all sorts of processes inside your companies. Whether it is call center agent scripts or customer self-service and troubleshooting flowcharts, or sales playbooks, or troubleshooting for any other kind of equipment, human resource processes, or field tech guidelines. But basically, the idea is that one person who knows about the whole process creates the flowchart, and then that flowchart can be shared with anyone, and then it can be accessed by anybody from anywhere in the world 24/7. And when they finish the journey through the flowchart, we can actually send email with a full transcript of all the steps they went through. And so this is actually very useful in many different use cases in a company, especially when you are a small team and you're trying to do a lot. Everybody's wearing a lot of different hats. So let me show you exactly how it looks like and why this topic matters so much here. So I'm going to play a quick video on how it looks when you're walking through the flowchart. As you can see, there is a lot of interaction going on with one decision tree. You're seeing images, you're seeing attachments. It's going a little quick here, but on the left, if you see one of the yellow buttons is actually an attachment and a link to other resources. And then there is a drop-down list that you can give the multiple choices to your viewer. And then there's also a form built in where you can ask for information. And all of this is actually packaged into a nice transcript, and we can save it inside. We can send it to you as an email transcript, or we can actually save it inside your ticketing or CRM systems. So we have integration with your common or most popular CRM systems like Salesforce. So within Salesforce, agents or your teams can actually walk through the same flowchart, and when they finish, the transcripts are updated in the details. So the point here is, the same thing with Zendesk as another example of integration, where you can write inside your ticket or case, you can walk through a very detailed flowchart, and actually all of the steps are recorded automatically as a transcript. And so that actually reduces the work that the agent and the customer support team have to do, and makes it easy for them to actually become human with the customer. But you can see that there's so much interaction going on with the application, and there's all sorts of resources like images and attachments that are being shared at every click, every step. And we wanted to give all the functionality that you can possibly have in this interactive experience. And so one of the considerations was how to make it, how to make the application very interactive, but actually fast as well. So what we want to discuss here today is how we can reduce the load on our EC2 application server by serving the static assets of your application from the S3 buckets and by leveraging the CloudFront. So, if you are a very advanced AWS user, you'll probably have come across this best practice. But for a lot of the startups and the new AWS users, this actually is a very good hack to get more bang for your buck, I guess. So I guess the main two goals here are to optimize your EC2 instances utilization and actually serve the static assets much faster and at a much lower cost using the caching of your CloudFront edge locations. And that gives you eventually more speed for your applications to be very fast and interactive. So, so let's take a look at a typical simple client request and response cycle. So what happens is, for a single page application or any kind of REST API based application, what happens is there is a request from the client, which basically calls the REST API of your application. And without making this too much complicated, we are representing your application with just an EC2 instance here. And the idea is this EC2 instance is serving the REST endpoint for any request coming on your REST endpoint and responding back to the requests. And if there is any request for static assets like your index.html page or any JavaScript chunks or any CSS files, JPEGs, PNG files, image files, and any kind of sound or video files. And so in a very simple architecture, the EC2 instance would be taking the load of serving, both the REST API requests and the static files. And that can actually increase the utilization of the EC2 instance. And the other disadvantage also is that if too many requests come and too many of them ask for the same kind of files and they are big files, that can actually be very unreliable in terms of the EC2 instance's performance. So a better way of doing this is using and leveraging CloudFront and serving the static assets from the S3 buckets. So let me explain you what this diagram is representing. The dashed orange line here is actually the request coming from your client. It hits the CloudFront, which is sitting in front of the EC2 instance and your S3 bucket. All the static files are saved inside your S3 bucket. So when the request comes to CloudFront, we have actually configured the CloudFront in such a way that the REST API calls go directly to the EC2 instance, your application server, which is going to respond back with the request for that REST API request. If there is a request for any of the static files by the client, those requests actually are forwarded to the S3 bucket directly. And S3 being the globally available service, which is very reliable, it actually makes it very effective and cost efficient to serve your static assets from S3 bucket through the CloudFront edge locations. So they can actually be cached at the edge locations of the CloudFront service and then be consumed by the client. So when a client actually makes a request, the REST API calls are being served along the path you can see here as the green line. And then if there is any request for the static files, they will actually be served along this path using from the S3 bucket, along the blue line here. So this is the very simple high-level diagram of what strategy we are talking about here. So let me go and show you how to actually set this up in CloudFront and see how you can actually implement this. So this is actually a very good feature inside CloudFront. You can, when you create a distribution in CloudFront, set it up as a web distribution in your choices. Once you have it set up, you will go to the next step, which is the origins and origin groups. In that, you will have to set up 2 different origins. So now if you see, the first origin I have set up here is basically my the endpoint for my EC2 instance, which is running the application server. And that application server is meant to basically respond to all the REST API calls. And then the other origin I have set up here in the CloudFront service is the S3 bucket, where all my static files are going to be saved, and they are going to be served through the CloudFront edge locations. So once you have these 2 origins set up, the next thing is to basically set up your behaviors. So what I've done here is I've already used some simple examples of the types of files and the patterns in the request path and set up so that when the request from the client comes to the CloudFront, CloudFront will actually identify based on this pattern where to direct that request. So if it is a static HTML page or a JavaScript or some sort of a document or a blog page or an image extension, which basically is identified by any of these patterns, CloudFront will actually forward that request to the S3 static file origin, which is my S3 bucket. And if the request happens to be an API request, a REST API call from the client, it will actually forward that request to my application server. And then there is this default behavior, which can always reach my application server, but it will start checking all the rules that you have laid down in order from the top. And if anything doesn't match here, then it will actually go through the default behavior. But this actually gives you a very good way to separate out the static requests and all your REST API dynamic requests. And if you apply this properly, and you will go through a bit of a trial and error period in the beginning, but once you have set it up, it actually works very nicely. So I wanted, this is not a very complicated thing. I wanted to keep it very short and quick. So this is, there is some further reading you can do here. There's a very nice article from Amazon about this. And, CloudFront documentation also goes into quite a bit of a detail about this. So I really wanted to go through this very quickly and then see if there is any questions. I'm available for questions now.
So I have one question. Hopefully you can talk about how to have CI/CD pipelines and purging and invalidation and versioning handled in your scheme.
Right. So that is definitely the way to go. That's ideally what you should be doing. It's not going to be easy for me to talk about that here, but we can always take this offline. That's actually a pretty detailed topic, and that's something you should definitely look into and try to optimize. But I'll be happy to talk about that later on. This is actually not a very complicated thing. I was expecting to finish a little earlier. So that's great. I thank everyone who is watching, and please, feel free to check out desizone.com. And if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And I'm happy to actually give a little bit of a discount on anyone who wants to start a new account with us.